much in your AP test at the end of the year. But it is important for something known as contextualization. Us basically, getting background information for the events that are going to happen after this time period. So, long story short, we know that in the pre-Columbian times, pre-Columbus coming over in 1492, that the world was during the Ice Age. There were land bridges, as you can see here, between Alaska and North America, and between Asia, Russia. This allowed early humans to come across, migrate into the Americas, and these will be the Native Americans that we're going to talk about for a little bit here in American history. This map here shows you how diverse Native Americans were. It's an important theme to understand that they saw themselves as basically their tribes, the Comanche, the Chickasaw, the Cherokee, the Shawnee. They did not have the sense of unification that white people coming over would have. And so this was a weakness when they finally decided that they needed to resist white incursion into their lands. Three-sister farming. Corn is immensely important in the development of many of these native cultures. The Pueblo culture being out in the southwest United States, carving out homes out of the sides of cliff dwellings and things like that. By 1000 CE, the growing of corn, or maize as it's sometimes called, had reached the southeast, and along with beans and squash, led to growth in population for groups like the Creek, Choctaw, and Cherokee. You have to know that. Maize, beans, squash. AP likes to focus on trade items and important food products like that. Now, another major group in North America was the Iroquois Confederacy. They were among the most organized tribes in all of North America. We'll be seeing them for a while. They're able to resist whites better than many of the other natives, and most of the Iroquois lived in small scattered settlements. The women would do the farming and the men would do the hunting. We're going to see with the Iroquois that they are able, like it says, confederacy. They were able to get other tribes and other groups to join with them for protection against whites. Now, white Europeans see the world completely different than what Native Americans do. They are farmers, but most of the British coming over are definitely farmers. Many others are too, but some come over and just really are fur trappers and things like that. But many of the whites coming over are wanting to farm. To farm, they need large clearings of land, so they're cutting down trees and burning them and stuff, whereas many of the Indians were still hunters, and so this really messed up their food source because it got rid of many of the animals they based their lives off of. They saw property completely different. Indians were communal. There was no such concept of personal property. Everything was shared by their tribe, whereas for white people, this was boggled their minds. They just could not understand it. Native Americans had a much closer relationship with the environment, as you probably are aware of. And these cultural differences are going to end up in some major problems. All right. Causes, the 3 G's. You remember this from AP World History: God, glory, and gold. For Europeans, these are the 3 motives that are going to send them across the Atlantic Ocean. They want to become world powers through gaining wealth and land, and it's going to work. It's going to put Europe far and above everyone else. Economic issues as well. Of course, Columbus was searching for new trade routes. He thought he had made it to India. That was the biggest purpose, the first purpose in crossing the Atlantic anyway, was to get a shorter route to India. And another motive that comes from this is religious motives, of course. God, glory, and gold. God here. They want to spread Christianity. They want to weaken Middle Eastern Muslims who were growing in power in this time period. So make sure you know the 3 G's. Here you can see some of the action going on in this time period. The Spanish, you must know, are going to be the first because Columbus sails for Spain. He lands in this area, and then they're going to venture out. They're going to take over the Aztecs. They're going to take over all these smaller tribes, eventually work their way down, and they're going to take out the Inca Empire. We've talked about Pizarro. We've talked about Cortez in AP World History, so I'm not really going to touch on that much more here. The big theme here is that that Spain is first here and is going to control huge amounts of the New World for a long time before the English and the French are able to take parts away from them. All right, the Spanish are going to get very wealthy off of gold and silver because there is quite a bit of gold and silver in certain areas of North America, and the Spain are getting rich off of it. This makes England very jealous. It makes France very envious as well. They want in on the action. Here's a bunch of the trade routes. Portuguese, Spanish, and Dutch are all very powerful traders early on. Eventually, England will become a bigger player and France will become a bigger player. But early on, it's Spain and Portugal, and then the Dutch come in. So you can take a little bit of a peek here at trade routes. Again, AP likes to know trade routes and what things are being traded. Slaves, we got the triangle trade. We're going to talk a lot about the triangle trade, so we won't go into much detail on that here. What are the effects of the Europeans reaching the Americas? Well, of course, it opens up a whole new world. This massive Columbian exchange happens. Mercantilism as an economic system grows. The birth of capitalism is in effect. Massive conflicts with Native Americans over their land. Smallpox, measles, these European diseases devastate Indian populations. And, of course, we get the introduction of this new institution of slavery, this generational slavery, something we've never really seen in the world before. So keep those things in mind. Now, the big four, you got to know these four, and we're going to go in much more detail over the next couple of days in class. Spain, England, France, and Portugal. This power struggle ultimately led to several wars, big wars that had lasting effects. Spanish are first, like we said, land in the Caribbean. They're going to come up through Mexico. They're going to go south down into South America. The two big ones are the conquest of the Aztecs by Cortez and the Inca by Pizarro. They have first permanent colonies. It becomes New Spain. They found St. Augustine in Florida. They do this to try to help protect Spanish treasure fleets because the French buccaneers would hide in Florida and the English would raid their ships as well. They would let the Spanish do the work, and then they would just try to basically take over Spanish ships and steal the gold from the ships. Here is a look at the empires. You can see how incredibly massive the Spanish Empire was and their claims. The Portuguese held mostly to these parts of Brazil. This right here is blank because that's the Amazon, and that is very, very, very difficult and tough terrain for the technology of that time period. So there's not much going on there. So they're going to do their colonies around it. You can see pickaxes here for mining. These are the Andes Mountains. Mountains tend to have gold and silver and things like that in them. So there you go. Colonial class system, this should trigger your memory a little bit from AP World. Peninsulares are on the top. They're basically from Spain, white people from Spain. Creoles were white people who were born in the New World. They were just below the OGs, the original gangsters from Spain. Then in the middle class, you have mestizos, who are a mix between Spanish and Indians. And you had mulattoes, European and black mixes as well. And then on the bottom, you had black slaves, and you had native Indians who made up the bottom of the colonial class system in Spain. Massive influence by the Catholic Church. South America is still predominantly Catholic, as is Central America. And that goes back to the influence of Spain and it being a Catholic nation. Okay, so, no, we do have some more, sorry. It lagged on me. All right, Bartolomeu de las Casas, very simple. We also talked about him in AP World. This is a guy who saw the atrocities of what the Spanish were doing to the Native Americans, and he appealed to the king that these people could be converted to God, that their souls could be saved, and And it works. The Spanish king comes down and says to relax a little bit and treat them a little better, and they do. But it's still really bad for the Indians who are still dying of smallpox. They are using the natives for cheap labor in something called encomiendas. You have to know the encomienda system. It's basically a plantation system where Native Americans are going to be used to grow cash crops under the watchful eye of Spanish overseers. And again, it's a bad system, kills off a lot of the population. They're dying of disease, and they're in some cases being worked to death. Encomienda system, you must know it. Moving north a little bit here, we see the Atlantic coast of what's modern day America. France. France is going to come in and be founded up here, and it will be New France. French explorers like Jacques Cartier and Hudson and people like that going to find New France. They're going to use this for fur. You must remember France and fur. Here, New England is very much different, or should I say the English colonies are very much different. They're very diverse. And so they're coming for different reasons, which we'll get into in following chapters. They're coming over. Some are coming for fur. Some are coming for settlement and farm. Some are coming for religious reasons. There are a lot of different reasons why the English are coming. We're going to talk more about them later. Right now, we're just basically introducing them. Okay. All right. Let's see if we got anything here. Okay. So, big themes that you need to know is Native Americans and how disunited they were, how they were communal in nature. They didn't understand personal property, understand the 3 Gs and the motivations for Europeans coming to the New World. We need to understand that the Columbian Exchange is set up and that this is massively beneficial to the New World, or to the Old World, back in Europe and Asia and places like that. Foodstuffs being traded and whatnot. We'll go probably in a little more detail later. But cows, horses, pigs, we've talked about those things are going to come over to the New World. And horses, are, of course, are going to be the major change in the New World. Make sure you know the Spanish colonial system, New Spain, being set up under the encomienda. Some atrocities happened there. Native American populations are falling fast. Bartolome de las Casas makes his appeal, and treatment gets a little better, but it's a little too late, basically, for all that. So this is going to set the scene going forward for interactions between Europeans and Native Americans that aren't going to go very well. And so the early part of American history is going to be a story of conflict between the native peoples to these lands and Europeans who are basically coming over. And if they're working for the government or trying to get rich, or if they're people coming over for religious persecution, or just people fleeing Europe trying to have a better life, we're going to have a lot of conflict between these groups. Okay, thank you guys.